Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Tech Elevator Live. So, I'm just going to give everyone a few minutes to join us here, but as people are coming in, as always, please go ahead and let us know in the chat where you're joining us from, and if you have any experience in developing web applications. So that'll give me a good idea of what I want to cover today. So. Today's topic is web developer tools. So we're going to take a look at two tools that a web developer will use on a daily basis. We'll talk more about that as we get into it. But again, as you're joining us, please go ahead and say something in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from and what level of experience you have with web development. So as we're letting everyone kind of just trickle in, I just want to say I hope everyone out there is doing okay. I hope you're doing safe. And I know it's Thursday. I know sometimes we forget what day it is, but it is Thursday, almost the weekend, so that's good. Seems we are a little bit behind on the chat too. No big deal though. Hi, I'm Elaine or Ellen. Sorry if I got that wrong, but from Northern Kentucky area / Cincinnati, some HTML experience. All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover today. But please go ahead and leave me some. Go ahead and leave something in the chat box below or over there, and let me know, and we'll go ahead and throw that in there as well. Also, joining us from Des Moines, Iowa, hobby coding, and yikes, hit send. So awesome, John, I think that is. Thanks for joining us from Des Moines, Iowa. So we have Northern Kentucky, Des Moines, Iowa, and hi, I'm a student at Columbus State's Community College. I'm joining from Columbus, Ohio. Awesome, thanks for joining us. John's back with, I'm a computer programming student and have done a good amount of hobby coding, medium experience with web development. Awesome, that's good to know. So one of the things that you might have be familiar with already is different IDEs and stuff. So we're going to look at one today that a lot of web developers use. So that's really getting to know your tools as a web developer is very important. It helps when it comes to productivity, and it really makes your job easier the better that you know your tools. So we're going to spend some time today looking at two tools that really helps web developers out. So Philly, PA, just getting interested. Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Robert. Glad to have you here. Philly, PA, awesome. All right, so I think what we're going to do is just go ahead and get started. Again, if you're coming in, please go ahead and leave in the chat where you're joining us from, what level of experience you have, and we will get into this. One more. Hi, I'm Josh, Pittsburgh area, musician with minimal coding experience, enrolled at Tech Elevator Bootcamp for summer 2020. Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Joshua. All right, so welcome to another Tech Elevator Live. My name is Dan Vega, and I am a curriculum developer at Tech Elevator. What is Tech Elevator? As some of us know here, seems like we have a couple students in here, which is great to see, but Tech Elevator is a 14-week coding bootcamp, and really it's our mission to help students from diverse backgrounds become software developers, and we do this through both the technical training that we do, as well as our career readiness skills and career connection pathway programs. So if you want to learn more about techelevator.com, up that way, techelevator.com, head over there and you can learn a little bit more about the bootcamp. Also, you see we're on various social media sites, so go ahead and follow us over there. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to see more. It's really hard finding stuff in the background. If you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and subscribe and let us know what you're interested in. A couple more. Joining us from Marshalltown, Iowa. I am mostly a SQL developer with some C#, wanting to learn basic web development. Awesome. That's good to see. Thank you so much for joining us. And then I was just going to get to you, Beth. Sorry. We have in the chat today Beth Campbell, who is an instructor from our Pittsburgh campus. So really appreciate Beth joining us today, and she's going to be moderating our chat. So if you have questions for me or for Beth, please go ahead and leave them there, and one of us will try and get to them. So again, I'm a curriculum developer at Tech Elevator, and I get the fun job of being on a team who puts together a lot of the materials that students go through, that our instructors use. I get to play with different technologies, make sure that everyone is up to date, and we're teaching the latest technologies, and especially the technologies that our partners, our matchmaking partners, our hiring partners want to see in potential hires. So that's a lot of fun. And today, what we're doing is we're just going through some live streams that really allow us to introduce some basic concepts. Oh, another one. Hi, Josh. Oh, she's talking to Josh. I'm also a musician and Tech Elevator Summer 2020 student in Cleveland. Awesome. Justine, welcome, and thanks for joining us. Okay, so let's get into just a little bit of the agenda for today. So we've been doing a couple live streams, and if you haven't been able to join us on those, no big deal. It's not a prerequisite for doing today's. But I will just kind of cover some of the things that we've covered in the past two live streams. These are recorded, so you can go back and watch these as well. In the first one, we took a look at some basic HTML fundamentals. So if you're brand new to HTML, that's a good one to check out. And in the previous one, we took a look at CSS. So if you're brand new to CSS, we laid the foundation for some basic CSS concepts in that. In both of those live streams, we used a tool called CodePen. You can find it at codepen.io. And it's really nice because it lets you write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript right in your web browser. So you don't have to install anything locally. This is a great way to get started. But eventually, you're going to want to be able to write code on your own machine. You need to be able to play with it locally, understand how things work, and ultimately push that code up to somewhere so that we can publish it for the rest of the world to see. So my plan is today, given the time, we're going to take a look at two tools that are really vital to a web developer. We're going to talk about a text editor / IDE called Visual Studio Code. We'll talk about text editors and IDEs in general. And we'll talk about a web browser. Now, most of you probably use web browsers on a daily basis, but you may not know that there are some tools involved in that web browser that you can open up as a web developer and gain some insight into your web applications. So we'll take a look at that and just kind of touch on that briefly. Just looking in the chat here. We're gonna try and build just a simple web page. I may take the portfolio that we started with last week and just copy that down to our local machine. Again, we'll see how time goes, but we're gonna build something and that we can obviously, or hopefully, push up to a hosting platform. Because one of the questions you're gonna run into right away is, hey, I was able to put this web page together, how can I get this out there for the world to see? So we'll look at a free tool for hosting your simple web pages. And again, please ask questions. Beth is in the chat. I'm here. This is, we could record videos and just put them out there, but I think the big power of doing live streams is the interactivity. You having the ability to ask the questions that you're not sure, you could just put in a comment somewhere. And this is a really great chance for us to help you, help kind of push you in the right direction. So please ask those questions and we'll get to those. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is take a look at text editors. Let me go ahead and open something up and we will flip over to my computer. Why that just zoomed in? That's kind of odd. Okay, so let's go over to the laptop here. And the first thing I want to take a look at is this developer survey results from 2019. So if you're new to programming or software development or web development in general, there's this thing called Stack Overflow. If you're not new, you've probably come across this. And it is a really great resource for when you're kind of stuck on something and you want to find answers to questions or you want to post your own question. Anyways, it's a large community, and every year they put out these survey results. And these survey results are really great because it gives you an insight as to what other developers are doing. There's a whole, like we could spend the entire hour just going over this entire survey. We're not going to, but we could. So I did leave this. I don't think I left this in the description. Let me go ahead and paste this into the chat. And if you guys want to jump on there, you can. This is just a result from last year's survey, and there's just a ton of responses. You can see this year nearly 90,000 developers told us how they learn, how they level up, which tools they're using, and what they want. So a lot of responses, and it really gives you an insight into what other developers are using. So what I want to look at here is technology. So first thing you can see is most popular technologies. So no matter what you want to get into, I mean, if you wanted to get into even something like game development or developing apps for an iPhone or an Android phone, or if you wanted to get into any type of programming you want, most of that really does rely on some type of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And you might be saying no, but maybe you're developing an iPhone app. Really, none of that has to do with HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, right? But what if you wanted to create a landing page for that application? That's where this really comes in. So whenever you see these surveys, you're going to see right at the top JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Those are fundamentals that everyone can learn, and everyone can learn even if you're not going to get into programming, just to, as we're doing today, build a simple web page. So as you can see, a lot of developers are using those three technologies. So now I want to jump down here and go into development environments and tools. So these are development environments. When we talk about developer environments, specifically something that you're going to use to write your code. Now, if you're on Windows, you can open up a notepad and start typing in there, and that would work. Probably, I don't advise that because it's not a great way to learn. There are tools that kind of help your development. So when you're writing code, you'll get things like IntelliSense that says, hey, this is probably what you want to use, or some insight into what else is going on in the application. So IDEs and text editors are really important to a developer. When it comes to web development, there are a few choices out there, but probably the biggest one, as we can see here, is over 50% of developers on the web development side. Actually, this is just most popular development environments. So this is out of all developers. We can see web developers in a second. Out of all developers, they're using Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code is a free I hate to call it a text editor at this point because it's so much more. So text editors for me are like Notepad. Notepad is a text editor. You can open up a document in there and write some text and save it. Visual Studio Code is really turned into almost a full-blown IDE because it supports almost every language out there has some type of extension for Visual Studio Code. And it's a free open source tool by Microsoft. Microsoft does an amazing job with this product. Every month they release a new version, so they move really fast on this, and they can basically have a blog post that goes out every month when this gets updated. And I'm just amazed to see all the stuff they put in this tool that is out there for free. So if we go over to web developers, you can see that number jumps up even higher. So we're almost at 56% there. So the reason I show you this is I just want to show you that what we're learning today is the most popular tool out there for web developers. So if you have some time, go through the Stack Overflow survey, the Stack Overflow developer survey, because there's a lot of really good information in there. Just checking the chat here. Okay. So what we're going to do is search for Visual Studio Code, and we're going to land on this page right here. So Visual Studio Code. Now, if you don't want to follow along, you don't have to, but if you wanted to, you can go ahead and download it, install it right with us, and we'll start talking about customizing it, some extensions, that kind of thing. Whatever operating system you're on, you'll see this will come up. So if you're on Windows, this would say download for Windows. And it's really easy to download and install it. I already have it installed on my machine, so I'm not going to go through this step by step. But if you do get stuck on anything, please go ahead and let us know, whether it's here today or you can go ahead and contact us. I'll give my email and my contact information at the end. So let's just pretend we downloaded this, we installed this, and we have it running. I want to talk about setting it up. So yours may look a little different when you open it up, but this is the Visual Studio Code homepage. And so it's basically saying, all right, what do you want to do now? Here's things that you can do to start. You can create a new file. You can open a folder. You have some recent projects. You have some help. There's some learn. So if you want to learn how to use Visual Studio Code, and there's some really great resources on customizing. So I'm going to close that though, and I'm going to basically start fresh. Well, that's a great question. Let me go ahead and throw this in the broadcast. So, great question there, Cassidy. What's the major difference between Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code? So, Visual Studio is Microsoft's tooling for all of their programming languages like C# and .NET, and I don't know if this is still the case. I'm happy to imagine, we can look at it later, but this is a paid product by Microsoft, and this has been their flagship IDE for as long as I can remember, and it's a really great tool. Again, Visual Studio Code is a free version. Started out really as just like, hey, let's edit some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it's really turned into this really awesome, full-blown text editor / IDE. Yeah, and some really great answers from Beth in there, so go ahead and check that out. But great question. Okay, so let's say we've installed Visual Studio Code, we're here, and we need to know what we're going to do next. So anytime that I download some type of text editor or IDE, one of the first things I really want to do is kind of customize it. Like as a tool, this is the tool that I'm going to be using every day. I really want to make sure that this kind of fits my needs. Now we'll look at a couple things today, but this is really an ongoing process. You really have to get into just writing code and doing things and then go, oh, I don't like how that is. Let me tweak that setting. There's so many settings in here. It's a little bit overwhelming at times, but you don't need to do any of that to get started. You can just jump right in and start writing code right now. So what I want to talk about is the real power of Visual Studio Code, which is extensions. So if we go down the left here, this button right here, if you hover over it, it says extensions. And so when you download Visual Studio Code, it comes with just a bare bones set of extensions. But extensions are a way that allows you to add functionality to to Visual Studio Code. So let's say, for instance, that I wanted to start writing Python code in Visual Studio Code. You can see that there's an extension for that. What I said before is there's an extension for almost everything, and that's the really great part about it. So one thing you can do is come in here and you hit these little three dots. You say, all right, I want you to go ahead and show me all the popular extensions. Or I want you to go ahead and show me all of the recommended extensions. So here we'll come in and say, these are ones that we recommend you install. So you can click on an extension, see all the details, what this extension does, and then you can go ahead and click install. And I can install this one. As I said, I do have a lot installed already, and what I want to do is actually just go through a few of my favorite extensions that will help you get going with Visual Studio Code. So I can come in and say, all right, I want you to show me all of the installed extensions. So let's take a look at these. So if you want, you can just kind of note these, or you can come back and watch the replay. But I'm going to talk about a few of these. And again, these are really productivity things. So like as you start writing code, if you realize that like, oh, why doesn't my editor do what Dan's did during the code demo? It's probably because of this, because I have some extensions installed that you may not have installed. So one is auto close tags. So what I really like about extensions too is you come in here, they kind of give you like a quick demo here, these like animated GIFs here. So you can see as someone typed HTML and then hit the close bracket, it went ahead and closed that tag for them. So you don't have to like add the ending tag to a HTML tag, which again, a lot of these things are really tiny, minor issues, but like when you start adding all of these up, again, they are productivity boosts, and you want to spend your time thinking about how to build things, not the semantics of typing out HTML text. So someone said they downloaded Visual Studio Code but do not see an option for extensions. So if you don't see this option on the left side, I think you can go to View and Extensions, and you should be able to get to that. Is it easier to have coding projects in mind when you start to work with these? If so, what are example beginner projects to get started with? So that's a really great question. I think that like you don't have to have full-blown projects in mind. It really depends on where you are in your journey too, because if you're just starting to learn the basics, you're gonna have to go through some tutorials where you just kind of learn like the fundamentals of HTML and CSS. Once you get a little bit under your belt, it's always good to take those and apply them somehow. And you can watch all the tutorials you can get your hands on, but unless you take that and then apply it to something, yeah, you're not going to learn. So coming up with little projects that you can work on, as we're going to do today, which is just a portfolio page that I can put on the internet, yes, for me, that's always helped. I always get inspired by like, hey, I just learned this thing. I need something to go apply this to. So yes, we'll see if we can get some project links up there. I know if you go over to say like a github.com and look for Beth, I don't know if you can find it, but we did have a link floating around in our Slack channel yesterday. I know from Florino Pop over on YouTube has a really great list of projects based on beginner, intermediate, advanced. But I'll see if we can get a link in there. But great question. So that's one tag. Another one I like is auto rename. So let's say that you had a tag and you wanted to rename it. As you rename it, it will rename the tag associated with it. So if you're renaming the ending tag, it's going to rename the opening tag. And this just really helps. Like say you had an H1 heading tag and you realize that, like, oh, I need this to be an H2. And you rename one side of it, the other side will go ahead and be renamed as well. Emmet actually comes part of Visual Studio Code. We'll talk more about Emmet as we get into this. Let me see. There is bracket pair colorizer. So we'll see this as we get into some code on our local machine. But when you have larger documents, you have all these, like, especially when you get into something like JavaScript, you have all these different all these different brackets, and it's hard to figure out like which ones are connected to each other. And so this bracket pair colorizer really helps kind of make sense of all that. So that's a good one. And let's see if I have a couple more in here that I want to share. I know there's where's my live stuff at? So live server is an important one. We're actually going to use this today. So when we develop a page locally, so we write a bunch of HTML, you could navigate to that page and say you're on Windows, you could double click on that, or in Finder on Mac, you can double click on that and have it open in the default browser. A much easier way to do that is to use this live server extension. And as you're developing it here in Visual Studio Code, you can just say run with live server. It will open in your default web browser, and it will start serving up that HTML file. And then as you make changes to it, it will update the web browser for you. So it's a really handy one. And if I had to pick one out of all of these, this is the one that you want to start with because it'll help with creating just basic web pages. There are also some live share things. So if you wanted to collaborate with someone, so if you and I wanted to work on a project together, Microsoft Visual Studio Live Share is really great. It allows me to connect to your computer or you to connect to mine, and we could both work on a document at the same time, similar to how you might have done in, say, a Google Doc before. You can have real comments. You can, hey, let me go ahead and type some code out for you and show you exactly what I meant there. So live share, and there's a bunch of live share extensions. So I could spend an hour talking about just extensions themselves, but I just wanted to show you a few. Go ahead and do some research. As you start writing code, you'll find out, like, I wish that Visual Studio Code did this, and it probably does, and it's probably through an extension. You can go out to YouTube and find, hey, what are the most popular extensions in 2020, and you get some information there. So that's one way to customize Visual Studio Code. Another way is through themes. So again, we were looking at really like productivity type extensions. There are extensions that install language support like we saw for like Python or C#. But there are also themes. So if you come in here and you type theme, you'll see a list of different themes. And for me, I always love doing this because I get to pick what colors I'm going to use, what icons I'm going to use. These are all like fun things to do to kind of customize this to be my editor, the one that I'm going to use every day. So it just lets you put your little flair on it. And I normally use something called Synthwave, which is like a purple. I'm going to leave this in a light theme for today because it's just easier on live shares and presentations to use a lighter theme. But you can go through and you can install a bunch of extensions. And then if you go up to code on Mac, I'm going to preferences. I think it's file or window preferences on Windows. But somewhere in your preferences, you can go ahead and change the color theme. So as I am in here, I can start to see the different color themes that I have. And there's some really cool ones out there. Like I said, I'm going to go ahead and leave this on this one for today, but you should experiment with different themes and again, find one that kind of fits your style. So that is another way that we can customize Visual Studio Code. Another way is through settings. So if you go up to File, or at least on a Mac, I'm going to Code, Preferences, and Settings. If you find the settings, you're either going to be confronted with a JSON file, which is just a whole bunch of key value pairs on how you're going to set something, or up here in the upper right, you can switch it to more of a user interface, and you can search for different settings. And so this is really another way to really customize everything that goes on here. Again, we could spend all day going through this. I am constantly tweaking these just to like change things and update things. One thing I really like is, I'm gonna look for file, let's do save. So format on save, we have an extension that allows us to make our code pretty. It's called Prettier. So basically when I save a file, it will run this extension that basically formats it. And that's really nice because I don't want to mess with formatting. Like I don't want to type some code out, save it, and then go, oh, that's not formatted correctly. Let me go fix that. Like those are things that your text editor, your IDEs can do for you. So again, I know I'm leaving you with a lot to do, but once you get Visual Studio Code installed, and after you spend a little bit of time just writing code, go ahead and take some time to try and customize it yourself. Do a little research on what extensions might be helpful to you, depending on what you're doing. Here we're doing web development, but whatever you're doing, there's extensions for. And you'll want to come in here, customize those settings, customize the extensions, find your own theme, and all that stuff. So that's a little bit about Visual Studio Code. We're going to come back to this in a second when we actually create a project. But that's Visual Studio Code. I'm just checking the chats here. So yeah, so Beth, thank you for that. She added the app ideas. There's a whole bunch of really great ideas in there. Again, some of those, I like the basic ones in there, just getting started. Learn the basics of something like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then start to like build out little projects, and that really helps reinforce things. I know I get into this. Let me just come back here for a second. I don't know why we're zoomed in, but I get into this a lot too, where I get into this analysis by paralysis, and I just like read every article out there, and I watch every tutorial, and I don't spend enough time doing so. If you watch any of my videos or live streams, you're going to hear me preach this a lot, but it's very important. Like if you want to learn how to code, you need to code. Watch the basics and then start building on those. Find reasons, find something to build that inspires you, and that's going to go a long way in helping you in your journey to learn how to code. So let's go back over to the laptop, and I'm going to head over to Chrome, and we are on a page here. I'm going to go ahead and actually go over to techelevator.com. So what I want to talk about now is the web browser. So as I said before, we all use a web browser. I'm using Chrome here. I also have Mozilla Firefox installed. There's also Microsoft Edge, which has recently switched over to Chromium, which is kind of the rendering engine behind. So it will act a lot like Chrome does at times, but there are other things that Edge does. And there is Safari, and then there's also different versions of these on your mobile phones or tablets. But from a web developer's perspective, we use a browser to not only view the results of what we're building, but there are tools in these browsers. So in Chrome, there's something called the Chrome Developer Tools, and in Firefox, there are the Firefox Developer Tools. And they're not all exactly the same. In fact, Firefox has done a lot of things with their developer tools that I really like. But Chrome developer tools are really good. So the way that you get to them, they're installed already. You don't have to do anything to install them. is we're going to come up to this little button here and go down to More Tools and Developer Tools. So if you click on Developer Tools, it's going to bring up this little box down here. And you're going to see a whole bunch of tabs across here. You're going to see a whole bunch of just things going on that you may not understand yet, but that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I don't know if I added these to the description of the video, so I'm going to go ahead and throw you some links in here. These are just some information about both Chrome's developer tools and Firefox Developer Edition, which has their developer tools, if you want to learn more about this. But we're going to go through a couple things today. And so the first thing I want to talk about is where this window is positioned. If you click on these three little dots here, you can see this dock side. So you can actually unlock this and have it be a floating window. Currently, you can see it's docked on the bottom. If you wanted to, you can also dock it on the right. Or I'm going to go ahead and put this back on the bottom because in this case, that's what I like. On a widescreen monitor like I have at home, I actually have this on the right side so I can have my full screen there and then do what I need to do in the developer tools. John said F12 on Windows. Correct. So there are shortcuts for this, and you'll get in the habit of using those later on. But here we can see that it's Shift Command. Oh, where am I? Sorry. All Option Command I on Mac. So yeah, there are now not only shortcuts to bring up the developer tools, but like each of these tabs, you can kind of get to those really quickly as well. So one of the things that this does is it allows us to inspect different things on our page. Maybe we want to find out like why something's going on. So if you're on a page and you right click on it, there's an inspect. So I can say inspect. And now that's going to take us into the actual generated source code, the HTML or CSS, and let us get a look at what this is. So this is a little bit different, but you know, I started web development 20 years ago, and I learned a lot by just doing this. I would look at pages that I thought were really good, and I would view the page source, and I would say, all right, now I see how they built that. Let me go ahead and try to implement that myself. So just using that mentality, if you found something on the web you liked, you could probably get a good idea using the developer tools on how they built that. And that, for me, that was a great way to learn because it inspired me. Those kind of designs inspired me to find out how people were building those things. So that's one way to get into it. You can also get in here and go ahead and change things. So if I wanted to, I can come in here and say, all right, welcome to Tech Elevator. So right away, I just changed a button and I didn't have to go back to my source code and update it. Now, this isn't live, like nobody else is gonna see this change. In fact, if I refresh this page, you're gonna see it revert back to what it's supposed to be. And that's fine, but this is a great tool for us to be able to manipulate things in our designs, especially when we're working locally, and just see how they might change without having going back and forth to our text editor to change something and see the result. So there's all kinds of like HTML, CSS, there are so many tools that we can talk about here, but again, we can spend another day or another hour just on getting an overview of what this does. So I do want to show you one little trick though. Here to the left of Elements is this little toggle device toolbar. So if you click on that, it's going to go ahead and change it. And right now it says, hey, this is an iPhone. It looks like it's in landscape mode. Now we're back in portrait. So you can toggle between different devices here. So this is one way that we use to be able to see how our designs are going to look on different form factors. When you're developing for the web these days, you really need to understand that like people are looking at your content on many different devices. They could be viewing your page on a mobile phone, a tablet, a computer, a fridge, a toaster, whatever. You know, there's so many connected devices these days. And so you need to make sure that your designs work on different devices. And there is a way to go in here and like change devices. Now I want to see what this looks like on an iPad Pro. Well, this is in portrait mode. I want to see what it looks like in landscape now. So again, this is a really great tool. And what this does is just kind of mimic what a device is. So one thing I want to show you, let me see if I can pull this up. Just pulling this up, I want to make sure. Can't control content on Instagram, so okay, let me do this. So I'm going to pull this tab over, and I'm going to inspect this. Okay, so does anybody know that on a, let's just turn that off. So does anybody know if you go to Instagram.com on your phone, you know that you can't go ahead and like upload a picture, right? Or I'm sorry, you can on your phone, but not on a desktop. So one of the cool things you can do, just a cool trick I thought I'd show you with the developer tools today is sometimes I have photos on my computer that I want to go ahead and upload, or sometimes I have just a long thing that I want to type out. And I know I'm sounding really old here, but I hate typing paragraphs out on my phone, so I like being able to use my keyboard to type them out. So you can come into the developer tools here. You can go to Instagram.com, change the device. And what this does is it sends this user agent string to Instagram. It says, this is where I'm viewing you from. So that's the only way Instagram, or any website for that matter, has to basically indicate that you're coming from a phone and not a desktop. They block, for whatever reason, the ability to add photos on your desktop. So coming in here and just changing this to iPhone, and go ahead and refreshing this. Just going to be careful here because I don't know. Again, I can't control this. So, oh yeah, that's fine. Oh, where'd it go? So now that we're on the iPhone X, you can see that it went ahead and added this toolbar here. So now I can come in and I can go ahead and add a photo if I wanted to. And then I can go ahead and type in my caption, like if I had a long paragraph, and I can add tags and whatever I wanted to do there. So just a little trick I thought I'd show you with the developer tools using this device bar here. So if you hover over this, you can see toggle device bar. If you uncheck it, it would go back to the normal mode. But this is a way to mimic different devices. Just a cool little trick I thought I'd show you with that. So those are the developer tools. Those are really the two things that I wanted to cover as far as tools go. And so what I want to do now is actually get in and build something. So let's do that. Just checking the comments here. Okay, so here we are in Visual Studio Code. The first thing that you want to do is actually open a folder. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and click Open Folder. And in my development environment, you want one good practice that you can do is, go ahead and set up HTML. So one good practice is on your local machine, you want to designate an area where you're going to kind of store code. So I usually have a folder called dev off my home directory. So this could be in Windows off your home directory, and Mac off your home, wherever you want to put it, but create a place where you're going to store your projects. Don't just store them on your desktop or your downloads, because I find myself often trying to clean those things up and I don't want to delete this code. So I usually find a dedicated folder on my hard drive where I can store this stuff. So under dev, I have a new folder called HTML, and I'm going to create a, I'm going to say my portfolio. And inside this folder is what I want to open up. So I'm opening up a blank folder. If you had an existing folder, you can open up that folder. That'd be fine too. And so now I have this new project. So it's my portfolio project with nothing in here. Nothing is ready to go. So what I'm going to do is up here, I have some buttons here. I have a new file, I have a new folder. So this is a way I can start to create things in this folder. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file. I'm going to call this index.html. So now, let me go ahead and bump that size up a little too. So now the next thing that I would want to do is I want to create a blank index or a blank HTML file. So now you could come in here and say HTML. You see that closing tag, that was one of the extensions I showed you. You can come in here and say head, title, etc. But there's actually an easier way to do this. So something that you get installed by default with Visual Studio Code is called Emmet, E-M-M-E-T. You can find more about that at emmet.io, I think. But Emmet allows you some shortcuts to go ahead and create some markup really quickly. One of those is to create a new HTML document. So if you just hit the exclamation point, you see there it says Emmet abbreviation. If I do that and hit tab, you're going to see it write a whole bunch of code for me. This is all the stuff that we don't really care about. The title, I'm just going to call my portfolio. The title is basically what's going to appear in the tab. So if we head back over here, this Visual Studio Code code editor, that's what's going inside of the title tag. And then the body is where we're going to basically put everything that is going to be displayed in our web page. So this gets us to the point where we were in the previous two live streams, where we were using CodePen to go ahead and write out our HTML and our CSS. Everything, for that matter, goes right in here. So what I want to do is, because we only have about 10-15 minutes left, I'm going to copy some code. And actually, let me go back. I do want to show you a couple things. So another thing you can get into with that Emmet abbreviations is you can kind of quickly create code. So if I wanted to create a new H1, you can see I don't have to type the entire tag out. I can just type H1, and you can see there's an Emmet abbreviation for that. I hit tab, I get my H1 tags. Furthermore, if you wanted to do things like, hey, I want to create 3 paragraphs, you can say, all right, P times 3. You can see that Emmet abbreviation. Hit tab, and now I have 3 paragraphs. You can also get a little even crazier and say, all right, 3 times, I want you to go ahead and create some lorem ipsum, which is some fake text. Hit tab, and now you get these 3 paragraphs with some text in it. Maybe you wanted to do lists. So maybe I had an unordered list, and I want to create 5 of those list items. I can go ahead and hit tab, and there we go. So again, Emmet is one of those things that's really handy. You'll find it around the web, whether you use this editor or online editors. It's very handy when you're creating things like markup. So check out emmet.io, I think, for all of the shortcuts. You don't have to learn them all at once. You just pick up a couple, and it just starts to cut down on all the things that you got to type out. And again, all of these little things add up, and it makes you a little bit more productive. So learn something new each week, and you'll be on your way. So that's all I want to say about Emmet. So let's go back to the browser. I'm going to go over to CodePen. And the reason I'm going here is last week we didn't get a chance to finish up our portfolio. We were learning some basic CSS, and I threw out this portfolio project. Again, just a basic, dashboard, just a basic portfolio project with some HTML in there. We were going to add some CSS in there. So I'm going to go ahead and share this pen out, which means that if you've never used CodePen before, again, allows you to write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but you can do it online without having to do it on your local computer. But I can now share this out, and you can get access to it if you wanted to. And what this will allow me to do is copy the HTML and go back to my Visual Studio Code, and I'm just going to paste that in. So I Control A to select everything on CodePen, Control C to copy it, come back to my editor, and I paste everything in. So what I pasted in here, and I want to show you this too, anything that opens on the sidebar, so right now we're looking at the Explorer. This is the list of files that we're working with. You can go ahead and close that if you want to get some more room to be able to look at your code. So here's just some basic HTML that we could have went through and done, but I have like a heading 1 that says this is my web developer portfolio. I have an image that we found on Unsplash last week. So this is just a like a general bio image. So when you're working with images, you can either reference the image that's online somewhere, or you could have downloaded it and then used it within this project and referenced it locally. So there are a bunch of kind of things to understand about images, but we're just going to use the image that's out there on the internet right now. So we have some paragraphs. This would be like some about text. We have another heading. Hey, this is my work. I have, I think, just one image there. I have some services. Hey, I'm available to do web design, development, and hosting. Here's some testimonials, and here's some contact information. So let's just go ahead and put this contact info in. We'll say email me at dan@technologylibrary.com. There's my email if you need to get a hold of me. And we went ahead and saved. So you saw that format, all right? That's because I went ahead and saved it, and I don't know why it added some weird things, but one of the things you have to work with when you're working on a local machine, as opposed to something like CodePen, is you can either go into your settings and say, go ahead and auto-save this all the time, or like I have here, I don't have it on auto-save. So one thing that you'll see is this little dot up here is basically indicating to me that I've made some changes and I haven't saved my document yet. So you want to go ahead and save that. And you'll see I have some formatting things going on. It's just a way that I have it, preferences I have of different way I wanted things format. And so that is the basics of our HTML. So now what I want to do is I just want to show you the live server extension. So once you have all of your HTML set, we'll go ahead and add some styles to this in a minute, but this is just my markup, so it's not going to look real good, but that's okay. We're going to come back to that. Once you have this set and you want to be able to browse this and view it locally, this is where that live server extension comes into play that I told you about before. With that extension installed, I can go ahead and right-click on this HTML file, and I can say Open with Live Server. Once I do that, it'll pop right over to the browser, and it will go in there and show me what that web page looks like. I'll actually bump this back up. And so as I said, this doesn't look real good right now. We have this really large image. We have this CSS. Nothing's looking very stylish. So let's go ahead and style this up. We talked about this last week, but here's just a quick overview of some CSS. When we did it in CodePen, we just added it into the CSS box. When we do it here locally on our machine, we're going to create a new file. So we're going to come in here and say New File, and I'm going to call this styles.css. So this is our style sheet, and this allows us to go ahead and separate our markup from our styles. So over here we have our HTML. Over here we're going to have our styles. So what I want to do is go ahead and basically include that style sheet in my web page. And to do so, I'm going to use another tag called the link tag. And it's going to have an attribute of rel equals style sheet. And then you need an href, which is basically the location to the style sheet. Because it's in the same directory, I can just reference that. And the nice thing is, you'll see Visual Studio Code start to offer some suggestions. So right away it says styles.css. Is that what you were looking for? I can say yes, I can hit tab, and that will finish that for me. So if you're new to Visual Studio Code or IDEs in general, this is really what I was saying before, where this is going to help you in development. You could do this in a notepad, but you get a lot of like assistance from the IDEs. And Even furthermore, if there are some crazy extensions out there that like use machine learning to go look on GitHub and find like, all right, what are the most common things people have written code with? Or what methods are people using? Or what tags are people using? And those machine learning things can go ahead and figure out like, okay, these are probably the most 5 used tags in this situation. Which one of these do you want to use? So there's some really interesting things going on in that space as well. But sorry to derail us. So we have our style sheet, and we want to go ahead and include some styles. I need to save this page, head over to my style.css, and what I'm going to do is, for all of my body, I'm going to add a new font family. So before, when we did this in CodePen, we had to really type this out because we didn't have any assistance. Now, when we type font family as a CSS property, we get some insistence here as to like, hey, these are the options you have when it comes to changing the font. So I'm going to choose Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif. I'm going to go ahead and bump the font size, actually not on the body, but on all my paragraphs. I'm going to say I want that font size to be a little bit larger. And let's see what that looks like. So now as I save that, I've saved my HTML, I've saved my CSS. If I head back over to the browser, I don't need to refresh it. Those changes are automatically reflected here in the browser thanks to that live server extension. One thing I noticed right away is this image down here is really large. So let's go ahead and fix that. So if I come into my index.html here, under my portfolio, this is the image that I'd like to fix. So I want to go ahead and add a class to this. And I'm going to say that this was my portfolio. So I'm going to save that. I'll come into my styles here. I'll add a new class for portfolio. And I'll go ahead and say that the width of that image should only be 500 pixels. So if I go ahead and save that, I don't know why I was doing that. So do I have styles.css? I do. Huh. Live coding at its best. Let's go ahead and change this width to 500. So part of the fun of this is experiment. Oh, you know why? I'm pulling that image in from an outside resource, and that's not going to let me change it. So no biggie. Let's just go ahead. I think we can change the size here. So let's try and get rid of that. Yeah, so no biggie. Let's just get rid of this image for now. Again, this is pulling an image from an outside resource. We could actually download this on our machine. We can put it in an image folder and locate it or reference it right in our project. But I'm just going to leave that alone. Oh, oops. Actually, I see what somebody said. I was not talking about the right one. Yeah, that might help. There you go, live coding at its best. Thank you, Cassidy. So this is our basic portfolio page. I'd like to spend some more time on it, but we can't. I want to be able to show you how to go ahead and push this somewhere. So I have this my portfolio project, and I have this HTML file and this CSS file. And so what I want to do is actually push this up to the public so that somebody else can see it. So one of my favorite resources for this is a company called Netlify, not to be confused with Netflix. Because every time I go to type in net, I either get Netflix or Netlify, and I struggle which one to go to because they're both great. So here, I'm going to go ahead and log in. And you'll see I have a bunch of projects on here, but down towards the bottom, you can go ahead and deploy a new site with just by dragging and dropping a folder right onto this. So let's go ahead and try that. So I'm going to bring up Finder. I'm going to bring this over here, and let me just find this really quick. So here is my HTML folder that we created before, and then my portfolio folder. So once I have this figured out, I can go ahead and grab this folder, and I can just go ahead and drop it right here. And it's going to upload it. It's going to say, hey, your site's been deployed, and you can view it right here at this randomly generated URL that they have. So I'm going to open that link in a new tab. And now you can see my portfolio project is out there on the web for everyone to see. So if you wanted to, you could send this link over to someone else and say, hey, can you check this out for me? And it's just a really fast, free way to get a static website out on the internet. Now there is this weird URL, but if you wanted to have your own custom URL, you can go ahead and set that up. You can buy a new domain name for like $12 if you wanted to, and have a custom domain name point right to this site. And so that's a really quick and affordable way to get a website up and running. So if you've ever had an inclination or aspire to go ahead and throw something up on the web, there could not be a better time to do it. And I think Nullify is one of those really great companies out there doing a lot of really cool things. So I think that is all I wanted to show off today. Again, I know it's not a lot, but we only had an hour. And I really wanted to be able to show off just being able to look at some of the tools that we use. So when it comes to Visual Studio Code, using the web developer tools, whether it's in Chrome or Firefox or Edge, those are really handy when you start building websites or web pages locally. And just a really easy way to develop a simple page and go ahead and post that online. So please go ahead and ask some questions. If you have any questions in the chat, I'll stick around for a few. And if you have any suggestions for videos you'd like to see from us, please go ahead and let us know in the comments below, or even go ahead and send us an email. Again, you can reach me at dan@techelevator.com. If you have any questions about what we did today or Tech Elevator in general, I'd be happy to help with that. So I have a question here. What is a good website for back-end web request handling examples? Back-end web request examples. So are you talking about you're creating a front end for your application and you want to mock out, say, like a web API or something? If that's the case, there are some pretty good resources out there. There's just a whole lot of resources. Off the top of my head, I do a lot of mocking internally, so there are projects where you can use something like JSON server to mock everything out locally. But if you want to send me an email, again, dan@techelevator.com, I'd be happy to answer that a little bit more specifically. Any more questions? Please feel free to go ahead and add them. Again, if you want to take off, I know it's lunchtime in some areas, please feel free. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. I really appreciate it. I know your time is valuable, so we appreciate you hanging out with us today. And I'm just going to give it another minute here. If I don't get any more questions, we will call it a stream. And as we're waiting, again, I hope everyone out there is doing great. I know these are tough times, but I hope you're staying safe and You and your family are doing good. All right, so I will say if this session sparked your interest in learning to code or landing a career in tech, I encourage you to check out the link in the description below. It has an overview of Tech Elevator along with a link to our aptitude test, which is a really quick way to find out if you have what it takes for a career in coding. We also launched a Learn to Code resources page, so exciting stuff. I really got to help put this together with a lot of different people on the team. And this was created by expert software developers. There's lots of really good video content on there, tutorials, blog posts, and I think this is a really great resource to support you in your journey of learning how to code. So check that out. The link is below, techelevator.com/learn-to-code resources. Links below. Go ahead and check that out. Another comment, thanks for sharing. No, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Another question, I would be interested to see more on loading a respective navigation file. Navigation file. What do you mean, John? Do you mean building like the actual navigation of a website? Oh, thanks, Katie. Thanks for joining us. Someone was asking about mocking out a backend. There is a JSON placeholder. This is a really, if you go to JSON placeholder, it's probably out of the scope of this one, but I'll answer your question real quick. JSON placeholder is allows you to kind of fake out a REST API for your backend. Yeah, I'd be interested to see more on loading a respective navigation file. So I'm just gonna take a guess here, but if you're on a web page and you want to link to another page, so everything that we've done in these live streams is really just a single page. There are ways to, when you're building websites, you're gonna have obviously more than one page. You look at something like Amazon, they have like 1 million pages. So how do you link to those other pages? Yeah, so right now we have just the index.html in our site. If you wanted to, you can create another file. So we can say about.html. And here in our index, you can come down here and we can just say, I want to go to that about page. So all you got to do is say about.html. And then the text inside of the tag is what's going to be displayed to the user. So if we go back over to the index page, and go down, you can see that says about page, and then it takes us to about, which is currently a blank page. So the question was where you can load in a navigation file, PHP or JS, so you don't have to make a change to the navigation section on every file. Oh, I wasn't sharing my screen, sorry. But I think what I was doing probably isn't going to answer your question anyway. Where you can load a navigation file, PHP or JS, so you don't have to make a change to the navigation section on every page. Okay, so yeah, I got it. Sorry that you guys can't see my screen. So what you're talking about is when you get into building static sites, you may have like 5 or 6 or 7 pages, right? And you don't want to recreate a lot of the layout things on every single page. This is where something like a static site generator comes into play. So it allows you to create things that are going to be common among your design. So maybe a header, maybe a footer, maybe a left or right hand navigation. Those things are all common. You can kind of develop those once and then just change like what's in the middle of the page. And so there are ways to do that. Probably a little outside the scope of today's topic, but again, if you want to shoot me an email, I'd be happy to point you to some resources on that. Okay, I think we are going to call that a day. Again, thank you, everyone. I appreciate you joining us. I hope you guys are all doing well out there. And let us know if you are interested in seeing any other content from us. Almost the weekend, so enjoy it. Get through today and tomorrow and enjoy your weekends. And until next time, happy coding, friends.